Well, joining us now right here on Montana Talks, pleased to have join us once again on the show, VA Secretary Robert Wilkie. Mr. Secretary, great to have you back on the show this morning.
Well, thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me. And I'll just make one little side comment. At least I'm virtually out of the swamp.
Yeah, that's right. Virtually out of it. Well, welcome virtually to Big Sky Country here. And I know last time we got a chance to talk with you, it was great hearing a little bit more of your background. Of course, not only your military service. I think you did naval intelligence, spent some time in Naval Special Warfare Group 2 and the Office of Naval Intelligence. And looks like you're still a reservist yourself in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. Yeah, Colonel.
I missed it. That's right. I missed it when I left and got back in, and now my reserve duties have been curtailed in the last year or so, but I still keep that affiliation. And when I was Under Secretary of Defense, I was much more engaged on the reserve side because I felt that it kept me grounded. And I'll just for a second, I also saw as a child what happened to the Army when the entire Army wasn't called up, and that was during Vietnam. My father ended up being a senior officer in the 82nd Airborne Division, but he was badly wounded in Cambodia. I certainly saw that, but I also saw the military at a time when folks came back and were not appreciated. I always say that I can remember as my father wearing the red beret of the most decorated combat unit in all the armed forces and couldn't even wear his uniform off post. That's what it was like in the 1970s.
Wow.
And we can never return to those days.
Yeah, and of course yesterday was Vietnam Veterans Day, so I wanted to say a big thank you and welcome home to all the Vietnam veterans out there. Well, VA healthcare, and the reason I wanted to mention that you've also served in the reserves is because when it comes to our nation's healthcare system, not only does the VA provide healthcare for veterans, but as I understand it, I was tuning into an interview that you did with Larry O'Connor here a few days ago.
Yes.
You're basically the reserve healthcare system for our country. Talk about that aspect.
Sure. We have four missions. The first three people in Montana know. That's Veterans Health, Veterans Benefits, and Memorial Services. We also have a fourth mission, and that fourth mission is divided into three components. The first is during time of war when the entire military is called up. We come under the Department of Defense, and we provide the backup for military medicine. We open up our hospitals. We are part of that world, and that really hasn't happened since 1968. That was the last time that VA took in a lot from the active side. The second mission is natural disasters, and the third mission is epidemics. So, give you an idea of what we are doing in New York City. We are now supporting the Javits Center. There are 1,000 beds in there. We're providing telehealth. We're providing pharmaceutical services, and we are now providing counselors for mental health counselors. Where we don't have a lot of veterans in the hospital, we can, at the request of FEMA, open up our hospitals to act as sort of a pressure valve for cities that are under strain. So the most recent is in Orange, New Jersey. We don't have any. We have no strain on our veteran system there, and we've offered some ICU beds to the local community because their health system is breaking down. Now we just don't do this on our own. We do this at the request of the governors. Now Senator Tester and I talked last week, and I laid out for him the procedure if Montana needs our services, that would go from the governor to FEMA. So right now, in terms of the impact on veterans in Montana, I have not seen anything other than one veteran at Fort Harrison, and I believe that veteran is at home. Do I expect more? Yes, and we're preparing for that.
Yeah, because right now I think the latest I heard from your office, we're looking at about 780 roughly VA patients that have tested positive for COVID-19. Well, that was going to be one of my first questions, which is, okay, if the wave really hits Montana and our healthcare system gets overwhelmed, what would then say happen at Fort Harrison or the Seabach in places like Billings?
Sure. If veterans aren't, our own veterans aren't overwhelming the system, then the governor would make a request for us to open up beds and supplies to the people of Montana. That's already happening in, as I mentioned, New Jersey. It's also happened in New York. And it's also happened on a national level. I'll give you an example. We received an order from FEMA this weekend to take over the pharmaceutical purchase and supply system for FEMA, HHS, DOD, and the Coast Guard. So we will be the central supply station for medicine, oxygen, things like that for this emergency. So that's part of that fourth mission. When the president calls, we do that. But again, because Montana has so many veterans, veterans come first. It's only when we have that excess capacity would we open up our facilities for people outside of VA.
And we've got about 1 minute before we take a quick break, and then we'll have a couple minutes more with VA Secretary Robert Wilkie after that. But Mr. Secretary, talk about what you're doing right now to make sure that veterans are being taken care of, even in the middle of this pandemic.
So the most difficult decision we had to make was to shut down our assisted living centers, our version of nursing homes. Shut them down to visitors, shut them down to families. The majority of the 7,800 veterans who are in those homes are from World War II and Korea. And we just celebrated the 75th anniversary of Iwo Jima a few weeks ago. And it is a very painful thing to tell those warriors who had seen so much, both in the Pacific and Europe and also places like the Chosin Reservoir in Korea, that at this time in their lives, they could not see their families. So we're doing that.
But VA Secretary Wilkie, I know we've only got a couple more minutes with you here because you've got a busy schedule today. If you want to jump in on those two questions, or I know you also got a message you want to put out there to Montanans.
Well, let me just talk about community care, because Montana is the epicenter of choice. We have not stopped or paused choice. What we are doing is that in cases like wellness visits, we are taking a second look because we don't want to unnecessarily expose veterans to the outside. And I don't know the numbers from Montana, but in a lot of places in the country, the private sector is shutting down and not seeing our veterans. So we are telling our veterans, when it comes to those routine things, let's look at telehealth options, that we can handle things that way. But the big message for me is for our veterans, if you don't feel well, tell us. Don't come in. We don't want to put you in jeopardy or put our workers in jeopardy. Call Fort Harrison, call Miles City, Anaconda, Bozeman, Helena, the Vet Center in Billings. Call them. We'll put you on the right direction. I also want the families and the caregivers to know that they can call the crisis line at 800-273-8255 and contact us that way. They can also go to va.gov. Right there at the top, the banner, click it, and that will give you an avenue to reach us in a secure manner. But we want to protect you. We also want to protect our veterans community at large. In the last 4 weeks, we've sent out over 40 million communications, individuals, texts, emails, things like that. But they've also gone to families and to caregivers, because our military family, as you know, is a very different family from that in those in the rest of the country. And we rely very much on those caregivers and the families to support our veterans. And you mentioned Vietnam, my father's era. The majority of our veterans now come from Vietnam, but their average age is now up over 75 into the 76 range. So a lot of caregivers. My mother was one. So that's something that I am emotionally in touch with.
Well, and I know talking with my friends like George Blackard with the American Legion, they've been doing buddy checks, calling fellow veterans, because we know people are in isolation because of the concern of coronavirus, but there's also a concern that comes with isolation too. So, Mr. Secretary, greatly appreciate your time. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, and thank you for what you do, Aaron.